everyone, and thank you for joining our Matchmaker session today. My name is Hannah Elgersma, and I am the project coordinator with City Lab Hamilton. Matchmaker events are where we learn more about the projects that have been submitted by staff members and work with our faculty members to try and find good student, faculty, and staff partnerships to tackle the projects. Today, we are joined by Trevor Jenkins, Project Manager of Sustainable Mobility Planning, and Trevor brings us a community engagement project to understand what barriers women in Hamilton face to cycling and what can be done to increase these rates. So I'm going to start off with asking full questions. Trevor, could you tell us about your role at the city and how your work impacts Hamiltonians?
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me, Hannah. Thanks for everyone joining us today and anyone who might be watching this recording later on. So as mentioned, I'm the project manager of sustainable mobility planning within the city's transportation planning group. So really within my role here at the city, I kind of have two kind of focus. The first relates to new mobility. So the key part of my role in the past couple of years has been really trying to develop new program frameworks as Hamilton tests and pilots new mobility options, really try to expand travel options to residents. A lot of this comes from because the province of Ontario has actually permitted municipalities to test new devices to get around and really try to pilot those. So we're trying to really opt in to see, how do they work in Hamilton? Are they successful? Are they a good idea? Are they a bad idea? What can we do? So a couple of that kind of under my portfolio at the moment includes the commercial e-scooter pilot program that we've had for the last couple months here in Hamilton with Bird Canada. We have an ongoing one-way car sharing pilot with Communauto, which is just wrapping up its first year at the end of June. We just recently legalized electric cargo bikes, one of a handful of municipalities in Ontario that actually has done that under the new provincial regulations, as well as I provide a lot of support to our kind of administrative side of our Hamilton Bike Share program. So really there, trying to expand options for people to get around. It's not always necessarily involving having to drive everywhere, have flexibility. The other part of my job really relates to mid and long range sustainable mobility planning to really help support residents, workers, and goods get around in the future as Hamilton continues to grow. So some of my kind of recent projects there, we recently wrapped up our Complete Streets Design Manual, which is rethinking how we actually design streets to have narrower lanes, tighter curb radii, to really kind of emphasize the design, the safety within the design process. As well as some work related to the Bicycle Boulevard feasibility and pilot program. So this is kind of a new strategy we did in advance of our cycling master plan update, just to identify how we can take some of our lower volume, low speed roads and really make them better for cyclists. If you've been out in the last couple of weeks, you might have seen on Breadalbane, kind of near Dundurn and King, we installed kind of our first pilot site, just as a test to see how things work and really get that resident and cyclist feedback as well. And in the coming years, I'm leading a couple of exciting projects. One of them being the visionary and preliminary design of the new A-Line rapid transit corridor, starting at Pier 8, heading down James Street, up the mountain to Upper James and heading out to the airport, which will be a really transformative way to get around by transit, as well as I'll be leading the updates to some of our active transportation master plans within the next year, which is kind of the synergies that I see with this kind of challenge. So it's a little bit of everything, a little bit operational, a little bit of planning, so a good balance, I think, in my role.
Yeah, thank you for the overview, and that's exciting work. Do you mind guiding us through the challenge, some relevant background information and key objectives for the project?
Happy to. So maybe we'll start with kind of a bit of a background, but we'll provide some context to really what the challenge is all about. So from 2011 to 2016, the number of trips made by bike in Hamilton more than doubled from just over 7,000 or just under 7,000 to just over 14,300 per day. Prior to 2011, the number of trips have been fairly stagnant for the past decade or so. And we really kind of attributed a lot of that growth to a number of local investments, including the launch of the Hamilton Bike Share program, growth in our cycling network, as well as the introduction of higher quality cycling facilities, such as the separated cycling facility in Cannon Street, which you've probably seen replicated in a number of places across the city. Despite the growth in the number of trips, there really just remains a disparity between the number of men and women who are actually cycling. In 2016, roughly a third of all trips were made by women, despite making up roughly half the population. This was up from 28% in 2011, but there still is that disparity. That disparity unfortunately is very common within Canadian and US cities, but we know better is possible. So when we look at other jurisdictions with more established cycling cultures and networks, places like Amsterdam and Copenhagen, that tend to be at parity, we know change is possible. So really, I think for what we're looking for this challenge is trying to work with a team or a class to really answer the question, what barriers do women in Hamilton face to cycling, and what can actually be done to increase these rates. The first one, really kind of objective, I would say, would be kind of understanding the barriers that women locally face, particularly for non-recreational trips. Commuting to work, school, daycare, running errands, being social, things like that. More of those utilitarian trips that provide value and are your day-to-day bread and butter type of things you have to do, as well as taking that a step further and trying to identify some actions that the community, either we as the city or through support for our community groups can do to help really increase the rate at which women choose to cycle in Hamilton to really start working towards that gender parity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a logistical question. Just curious where your stats come from and how often those stats are taken.
Yep. So one of the big kind of key bread and butter data sources within the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, it's what's called the Transportation Tomorrow Survey. So it's a massive, what we call travel survey, covers from Niagara out to Waterloo, up to Simcoe Barrie, out to Northumberland, Peterborough, where they do, you get a letter in the mail with a secret code, you're randomly selected, then you enter all the trips you've taken that day. So they survey, I think, close to something like 800,000 households. And it's typically done every 5 years, and the same as the census year. Unfortunately, in 2021, the decision was made to pause for that year just because of COVID impacts. So they actually did the first wave last year. Now they're doing the second wave of survey follow-ups this year. So ideally, we'll hopefully have data sooner than later, just to update that. But right now it's kind of the best source we have at the moment.
Yeah, that's good. I love the line "better is possible," and I agree, and I look forward to continuing to see those improvements. So one of my questions is, what was the inspiration for bringing this project forth at this time?
I'd say it's kind of twofold. The first, as a city, through our transportation master plan, we've set a goal of having 15% of all trips in the city made by active modes, whether cycling or walking. Currently we're sitting at about 7% citywide. Hamilton's a large city. We have a very strong inner and kind of inner urban area, suburban area, and a very, very large rural area. So achieving that 15% target, and we're already achieving that 15% targets in many areas of our inner city, but trying to work towards that as a citywide basis when we blend all these different kind of land use contexts together is very much a challenge. So if you're not having women taking up cycling rates, it's unlikely we'll ever actually achieve that unless we work more towards this parity. I'd say the other kind of second inspiration for that goes to our cycling advisory committee. So the city of Hamilton has a cycling advisory committee that advises council on matters related to cycling. They initiated some work in early 2020 related to this. So, the credit kind of sits with them. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and unfortunately, that work didn't move forward as they had hoped. But there was a bit of work that they did complete around kind of a one-page kind of literature review that we're happy to share. But my team was very supportive of the work they were undertaking at the time. Unfortunately, the current advisory committee, their term is wrapping up in the next couple of months. So we'll have a new committee appointed later this year by council. We're not sure where the priorities kind of are going to be. So we really want to kind of move forward with this project to try to keep some of that momentum going. Just because we do have some exciting projects that we think we could implement findings from this potentially in, and really work towards that goal.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, which committee is that?
So that's the City of Hamilton Cycling Advisory Committee.
Yeah. So that's currently in a change, and right, they're changing.
Yeah, I think their last meeting's the first week of June, and then they're taking a pause for the summer. And I think, just from my understanding from timelines, a new committee probably will start meeting sometime in the fall.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is great. What do you suspect the work that comes out of this project will go towards and be used for more specifically, you can say?
So one of my upcoming projects that will be coming up is a review and update of our city cycling master plan. So really the master plan lays out, our cycling network and what we're going to try to build and aspire to, but it also includes supporting programs and initiatives nearly to help, increase that cycling culture and break down barriers. So I really see this work as directly feeding to that plan through a number of ways to really help towards that parity goal, really depending on really what the outcomes and direction of this work takes. I think a key part of it really focus on how we can do some supportive programming to help educate and encourage residents and workers to cycle. And I also see, depending kind of the findings, informing how we plan our network, or, is our network going to the right destinations that, women aren't cycling because they're not going to? Is it more about infrastructure safety? Those kind of considerations that, we might not take through a fully, traditional technical analysis. I'll also mention that my team has been fortunate to grow significantly since I started at the city in the last couple of years. So we are doing a lot of community programming, as well as we provide support to a number of local groups. So really trying to maybe support efforts they are doing and try to find groups maybe we can work with and support and can deliver other programming outside of, the city bureaucracy.
Yeah. So can you please expand on some of the specific deliverables or goals you're looking for from a student group?
Yeah, I'd say kind of there's two goals of what I think, I'd like to see come out of this. And I'm happy to work with any potential partners if they want to, discuss or modify things. But I think really the first kind of thing from that question is really understanding what those barriers that women locally are facing. There is good literature kind of telling us some of the typical barriers, but it always helps to bring that local perspective, just to confirm, is that the same case here? Are there unique challenges or unique issues? Are there, certain hotspot areas that just aren't comfortable to cycle, or, other barriers that we may be able to break down? So really trying to either do a survey or maybe a focus group or one-on-one interviews or something else, just to kind of engage with the community to understand, what are those barriers, and how the impacts are. On the flip side, it also might involve interviews with women who do cycle today and maybe understand, why they are, open to some flexibility there, but, just some potential ideas. I will mention that if there is a survey or something like that, my group does have access to a number of channels, and we're connected with a number of cycling related groups in the city. So we can help promote and, encourage that type of thing as well through our work. And I think the second goal we'd really like to see out of this project is really to get some actions or initiatives that the city can take to help overcome the barriers, to help work towards that gender parity. Is it simply, just having a bike buddy program that, matches a woman with another woman who are cycling the same destination to help them? Are there people who want to cycle, but they either don't have access to a bike, or, don't know how to bike? Is it purely about infrastructure, just growing our cycling network and providing, that safer, more dedicated cycling facilities? Really, as I start that update of the next cycling network and cycling plan, really want to try to bring this more gendered lens to this work. We will be doing outreach and engagement through that process as well. But, this is a very, specific topic that we think, deserves a bit more kind of focus, and people love to work with the student group to really understand that. In terms of, outcomes and deliverables, I don't know, thinking either kind of maybe a report or a succinct presentation, maybe a memo, happy to work on how exactly the results come out and presented. But that's kind of really what we'd love to see coming outside of this work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a bit of secondary, but like primarily primary research in the form of surveying or interviews, and then some suggestions, some analysis and suggestions of where to go forward.
Yep, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is there anything else that you would like to add about this project before we close off?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'll just add that if there is something that, any of you here today or watching later are interested, and maybe need some modification, happy to work with you and maybe try to find some common ground about, something that works for both of us. I will just put a quick plug for an upcoming event happening in Hamilton. So June is Bike Month in Hamilton, and we're kicking it off tomorrow morning at City Hall with Bike Day from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. So we'll have some treats, coffee, bike tune-ups, a number of kind of little fun events and vendors set up. So a great way to come down and chat with some cyclists. We are also giving away free t-shirts to anyone who registers in advance while supplies last. So it's always a fun time, get about 500 to 600 people coming out. I'll be there, but I'll be working registration, so I'm not sure if I'll be free to talk. But I figured I'd throw the plug in. More information at hamilton.ca/bike month.
I love that. And there's some group rides going from different parts of the city, which is exciting. And some of the counselors are joining those. So yeah, thank you for plugging that. Yeah, including to McMaster. Thank you everyone for coming. Stay on to keep chatting about questions and this. And yeah, thank you, Trevor, for the information today.